So what about training the plants, bro? Again, you've spoken to so many people with different techniques. What do you do when it comes to training your plants?
That's another thing, man, where I've done so much over the years. It's fun. It's fun to be able to manipulate these plants and see how they grow differently. I'll start with topping. Topping the plant is something I do almost every single grow. Is I'll top the plant, and I used to let the plant grow up to the 5th node, top down to the 3rd node, then keep those lower branches to grow up and widen out. I've topped at the 4th node and kept the lower branches to grow up. Topped to the 5th node, kept the lower branches to grow up. These days, it really depends on growth. I'll have some squattier plants where I'll just maybe do one top on. Other plants that have longer internodes and grow more stretchier, maybe I'll top multiple times. So it really all depends on growth, but most of the time I'm topping at the 4th or 5th node, letting those side branches grow out, adding in some low stress training, doing that on top of it. And then sometimes I'll do additional tops on those branches that came out. And, I've topped again and so on and so forth. I have a whole bunch of branches, but I typically like to have about 8, sometimes 16 main branches coming up is typically what I aim for. And then doing low stress training on top of it, low stress training with every single plant. And I just kind of keep it somewhat simple. I have those garden clips, those green garden clips, clip onto the side of the grow pot, use the garden ties, kind of look like the bread ties. And there's like two. Yep, those ones right there. Yep,
yeah, so you just snap it off however long you want it. You just like a little wire, boom, bread ties, totally. Yeah, you nailed it on that. So you use these as well for training down?
Yep, so pulling the branches down, using that to secure them down to the side of the grow pot. If I'm in a fabric pot, I use a safety pin to pierce the side of the grow pot, but still using those garden ties in order to pull the branches down. So just basic low stress training techniques there. And then super cropping is the other training thing that I do once in a while. I'll mostly do super cropping when the branch is more in the center of the plant and I can't really bend it down with low stress training. So I'll just super crop those ones. Sometimes like when I'm in a scrognet, for example, and I have some branches growing up taller than others, I'll super crop then as well. Those are really only the 2 times that I actually utilize super cropping.
Got you. And as far as like when it comes to lollipopping and defoliation, like what's your process or your strategy there?
So for lollipopping, I'll typically try to do it, push it off until like the first few weeks in flowering. Sometimes if there's a lack of airflow, I'll do it in veg, but it's usually either week 1 or week 2 in flowering, mostly sometimes week 3 of flowering. I will remove the lower 3rd, sometimes the lower 4th of the plant, and completely strip everything off. And I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but I take the stuff that I've trimmed off, whether it be small branches that aren't going to reach the top or leaves, and I'll cut them up, or I'll just, leaves, I'll just let them lay flat down onto the medium now, chop and drop style. And that turns into a mulch layer, which helps with the moisture retention. So that's what I've been doing recently for lollipopping. And then defoliating, I typically will do that as well. I'll try to push it off to the first 3 weeks of flowering. Sometimes I'll do it towards the end of veg, especially with the lack of airflow in the center of the canopy there. I'll do it on either day 1 or day 7 or as late as day 21. And the way I typically like to do it is I will remove the leaves more towards the middle of the plant. So if you're looking kind of top down, the middle of the plant, I'm removing leaves kind of almost down towards the entire bottom. And I do like to leave a lot of the outer leaves on the plant. So like the outside edge of the plants, particularly on the bottom of the plant. I call it the skirt technique, is something that, keeping those larger fan leaves on the bottom of the plant, around the bottom, so it kind of looks like a skirt. Particularly because I feel like, in the past, when I was coming across deficiencies quite a bit, particularly when using synthetic bottled nutrients, I'd get that nitrogen deficiency where people know that, textbook style, you see it start at the bottom of the plant and start at the tip of the leaves and work its way up towards the petiole. If I keep those bottom leaves on the plant, I'm able to identify that deficiency. And then I'm able to make adjustments, add in feeding. So that is still something I do today. I've been doing that for many, many years. So yeah, that's defoliation. And sometimes I will look towards the end of flowering, day 45, if it's like an 8-weeker, or sometimes a little bit later than that. If there is some leaves covering the bud sites, I'll look to try to tuck those leaves first But if I can't, then I'll do the removal.
Got you. So like, and for those like who might be listening, that might be the first time growing or just getting into it, how important is lollipopping, defoliation, or training your plants? Is this something that you personally do every single time with every plant, or are you just kind of doing it when you have time?
For the lollipopping, I do it for every plant in order to try to remove that larf that comes in the bottom buds that are there. Now, there are some cultivars that are going to dense up all the way down to the bottom. I consider that like, being lucky a little bit to have a cultivar that's like that, to where those bottom buds aren't larf at all. They're actually hard buds that are usable. But for a lot of cultivars, it ends up being larf. And nobody likes trimming larf. And it ends up in my trim pile, and I use it for oil and butter and all that stuff. But I want to get rid of it. So every single grow I do lollipopping. And then for defoliation, there are grows where just some cultivars you don't need to. Like I don't need to, because they're more like longer internodes. Airflow isn't impacted throughout the canopy. So I find myself doing very little defoliation, if at all. So yeah, it really depends on growth. Depends on the cultivar, in my opinion. This clip is brought to you by AC Infinity. Use discount code MrGrow at 15 to save on any of their products.